Jump into the Acacia Jungle 1 geometry node. We're going to replace these cold leaves with our Atlas leaves. Wait for that to update. We can also add a subdivide sop in to smooth our leaves, same as the smooth operation in Maya. And I think we'll just view from the subdivide sop. Jump into the Acacia Jungle 1 materials. We're going to copy the Acacia Jungle 1 leave single, paste it, and we're going to rename this to, let's have a think, to leave single underscore Atlas underscore front. Just like that. So this is going to act as our front material. I'm also going to, I think, cut out this from here, the dirt. We're going to add that in later. I don't want to confuse you guys. I want to keep the process nice and straightforward. So let's plug that in. I'll get rid of all these RS textures and we'll reload them back in. RS texture. And this will be our diffuse. Front. Let's browse our leaves, Atlas, processed, V2, ACCG, and I'll grab the front version. Trans col, trans amount, just like that. So that was the transmission weight that was going in here. Let's plug that in. This is the translucency color. We'll plug that one in. Got a roughness map that we need to put in as well. So this would be roughness underscore front. Let's load in our roughness map. Roughness front. Plug that in. Our normal map as well. Let's copy the file path from here, because this is looking in the Acacia Jungle folder. We don't want that. So we didn't save out a normal map because we aren't converting the normal maps to the ACES color space. I don't bother doing that. Although I may change my workflow at some point, but I find that leaving them as they are is fine. So we loaded that in, and I think the last thing to do is load in our alpha map for the Atlas leaves. Backup one, alpha PNG. Let's go to Redshift. Open up the render view. And we're going to apply, I think we'll take a snapshot. Let's apply our new material. Let's plug in our diffuse front. I thought I did that, but apparently not. Let's refresh the render there. Let's drop down a Redshift material. And we'll plug in our diffuse front. So we're just viewing the diffuse there. Drop down an RS color correct. RS color correct. And let's just boost this up to something like 2.5, maybe 2. Increase the gamma just a touch. 1.1 maybe. And be careful about pushing this too high. Let's view that again. Yeah, it's looking okay. Just going to check we've got this loaded in properly here at the front. Let's plug the roughness map straight in. I just want to see what this looks like. So we've also plugged this into the reflection color, which is the wrong slot. It should go in translucency color, which is why we're getting such a weird looking image there. Let's refresh that render. There you go. So that's starting to look a little bit better there. Okay, so we've corrected the diffuse. We've lifted up the values there. It's looking a little bit better. We've got our translucency color here coming in. That's fine. Our translucency amount, we could push this up a little bit. But before we push it up, let's test it out. See what it looks like. I think overall it's not looking too bad, but I think I want to mess with the levels a little bit. Get a little bit more contrast in here. Like so. Like that. Let's test that out again, see what it looks like. It's looking kind of nice. Let's put this up to something like 0.5. It's looking okay. I think we might drop that back down to 0.3, I think. Let's have a play around with the roughness. I'm going to lift up the black value of the roughness map to 0.2. Just to diffuse that reflection just a little bit more. There you go. So we'll take a snapshot. I'll reduce the roughness to 0. Now we'll just flip back and forth. So I think 0.2 works quite well in there. 0.28 maybe. Yeah, I think 0.28 works quite nicely for me. Let's test out our normal map here. Go up to 2, 4. It's getting pushed way too much. 1. See how that's looking? I think 1 actually gives quite a nice look. It's a little bit more natural. It's looking nice. I wouldn't mind playing around with this a little bit more. This translucency front, I think this could be pushed up. It's almost as if we're not getting that much backlighting through on this. So I'm going to view the translucency color. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. We'll drop down an RS color correct and boost this up to really push the backlighting a little bit more. Put that out to something like 3 so we can see it. Drop that in between here as well. Just make sure that's on there. So we got that happening. It's a little bit better. Let's add some saturation like that. Maybe even a little bit less, so just 10%. We'll plug this into the translucency color and view that again and see what we're getting. Now we're starting to get some nice translucency around the edges there, which is looking cool. Let's take a snapshot. I'll snip this translucency weight so we can see the difference. Let's turn that down to 0. So you can see there, just getting that little bit of translucency, which is really helping sell that leaf. Control Z to put that map back in. Just looking around, seeing how I can improve this. Okay, let's push this shader even more. We've added in the front side of our leaf. Let's add in a back side. We'll leave this out for a moment. I'm going to put this to the side. And what we're going to do is we're going to copy all of these and we're going to paste them. We'll leave the sprite there, right at the end. We only need one of those. So this can go right at the end of the chain, all the way out here. Let's copy all these nodes, paste them, rename them. Get rid of these redshift materials, just to clean it up a little bit. Diffuse back, transcolor back. And the reason I name all this is because we're going to reuse these shaders later. And whenever we copy them over to other material networks, for example out here, so if we copy these multiple times, then it's a lot more difficult to go through them later on and correct the names. So I'd recommend doing it right at the start. And that way you get into a nice flow of doing things the correct way. Okay, let's load in the backs. Transcolor back, transamount back. And just take your time with these steps because it's easy to put in the wrong map, which I'm sure you'll see me do at some point. Normal back. Okay, let's drop this material on now. I'm going to take a snapshot. Yeah, let's drop this material on. And okay, it looks like it's not liking that for some reason. I've missed something out. Just call that out. Let's put a redshift material here at the end. Not that it's needed. You can just drop a standard RS material onto the object. There you go. So we've got our backside working now. And just to test this, we can copy this sprite node. We'll drop it in between here. Refresh the render. And now we've got our backside. I was getting a slight misalignment with the normals for the backside. So I went back into Photoshop and I just shifted that over ever so slightly and resaved it out. Seems to be working fine now, so we're just going to run back through that. So I'm going to fire off the render. We're going to turn the normals up to about 1. And that's instantly looking better. I put a temporary roughness value in as 2.37, but we're going to plug in our roughness into this slot here. Something like that. I think we might even just drop this down to 0.35. Still want a little bit of reflection, but the backside is always a lot softer. If you want to copy my other settings as well, I sort of messed around with these sliders. Let's plug in the transmission color back. Oops. Transmission color. Shift that over a little bit. The transmission back amount. So now we're getting a nice looking leaf for the back. We're getting that nice translucency coming through. That's looking pretty cool. So we've made a front material and a back material. So what we want to do is we want to pipe these two materials into an RS ray switch, which allows us to create a double-sided material. So I'm going to type RS ray switch, drop it down, drop down the camera tab and the reflection tab. We're going to plug in the front material into the camera color. We're going to plug the back material into the camera color back. We're going to plug the front material into the reflection color and the back material into the reflection color back. And that means that the front side is receiving camera rays and reflection rays from the front material, and the ray switch is receiving camera rays and reflection rays from the back material. If you wanted to add refraction in here as well, you could, but we're not using refraction. So all we need is the camera and the reflection. Let's plug this into the sprite node. And we're only using one alpha to cut around our leaf, so there's no need for two sprite nodes. Let's drop this shading group on top and hit re-render. So there you go, we have a two-sided material. And one thing we need to do to get this to actually work is to enable front and back, like that. You notice that updates. And we're going to enable front and back here as well for the reflection. And the other ones we can leave as is. Let's refresh that. Take a snapshot. I'm going to move underneath so we can see the underside. So that thing's getting in the way a little bit. Like there. Just check that they're working, and they're working nicely. It might even be the case that we've pushed the amount a little bit too high here, so we could turn that down just to something more sensible like that. Maybe even 0.3. 0.4. Yeah, I think 0.4 is working quite nicely. Just going to move around. Let's take a look from the outside. And that's looking pretty good. And you might be thinking, these leaves look really dark. But that's kind of normal because our HDRI isn't pumped up that much. And this is what ACES allows us to do. It allows us to push more light into the scene without the scene blowing out so much. What we can do now is we can mix in our dirt. So I'm just trying to think where we can place this. Let's plug the ray switch into the base material here, and we'll leave that exactly as is. We'll zoom in to these leaves here, I think, or something. Any of them, doesn't really matter. Something around there, so we can preview it. Refresh the render. Take a snapshot. We'll plug this into the sprite. Refresh the render. And we're getting some dirt on the leaves there, which looks really cool. Just like that. And that just helps to break up the reflection that little bit more as well. And if you find the leaves are too dark, then you could boost this up a little bit. But my main thing that I'd usually do in this case would be to boost up the HDRI to something like 1. And you're getting much better values there. I actually think that maybe we could push the translucency on the front side material here. Let's just lift that up. Let's move around, see what it looks like. Yeah, that's looking pretty cool. Yeah, it's picking up some nice detail there. It's looking nice. I've jumped into SpeedTree one last time to update the sort of curl and folding on these leaves because I'm still not happy with it. And like I said before, there's such an importance on getting the bending right on the leaves. If they're too straight, you're just not going to get that nice backlighting effect. Okay, so with that said, let's just add some randomization to this. So I'm going to spread them out a little bit. Something like that. We're going to increase the knockout. So they start to die out a little bit. I think that looks a little bit more natural. We can rotate them. Just looking through these settings now. I think we put this down about 0.1. I like to add a fair amount of curl. We'll add a little bit more fold there. Yeah, something like that. Orientation. I think we'll just add some variance in the orientation as well. 0.1, 0.1, and 0.1. So they're all sort of pointing in different directions. That definitely helps. Can add a touch of twisting, although I wouldn't add too much of that because you'll start to distort the UVs. I'll add some variation in here as well. Variation in here. So we'll look at the folding. And I think a little bit of variation in here as well. So they're starting to look a lot better. And I'd really like to get the curl on these leaves. Really important. Let's take a look at some other areas, see how we're looking there. Spiral them as well. That should help. I'm going to sync these. So we're pushing the leaf further away from the branch. We just drop that back just a touch. Just bring a few of those back. And that should start to help, give it a bit more variation. Yeah, I'm just looking around, seeing what type of effect this is giving me. I think that's looking a lot more natural now. Let's export those out. I exported mine out as V2. At the end, we'll go and delete the original ones. But I version up just so I have something to go back to. So we'll open the render view. think I'll view from the top. Zoom in a little bit so we can see it, and you can see they're quite straight. Jump into the Acacia Jungle 1, and we're going to load in the V2. And we'll watch these update. There you go. And they're looking a lot better already. They're responding differently to light. Looking far more natural there. Yeah, we're starting to get more of that backlighting through. They just generally look a little bit softer due to their cold nature. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. That's kind of cool. Let's pause the render, and what we're going to do now is we're going to look at adding variation in the diffuse color on these leaves, so we have different areas of colors. So I'll jump inside. I'm going to shift this entire section down so we can clearly see that it's different to the leaf single. And the way we're going to do this is actually similar to the way we added dirt. And there's lots of different ways you can do it. And I'd probably say this is the simplest way. So let's delete that redshift material. So this is our diffuse texture being piped into the shader. And what we want to do is we want to mix in some noise. So we type RS noise. Let's plug this into a redshift material to test it out. Yeah, call that test. Drop it on top. Open up the render view. And what we want to do is drop the complexity down, I think, to about 1. Just messing around, sliding this up and down. Let's go to the coordinates. Just playing around with the values. Oh, there you go. The complexity has to be set to 1 or more. And we want to make this quite large. If it gets too detailed, we start to get this happening, and it'll start to look more like mottled or dirty. So we need to make sure that stays nice and big. Let's go to the color tab, and we're just going to mess around with the maximum. Minimum. So play around with the bias as well. Like that, I think. I think that's looking kind of cool. If you need to mess around with this furthermore, you can take an RS change range, which is similar to adjusting the min and max there, but got a little bit more control here. Create a little bit more contrast there. I want this effect to be quite subtle. So, okay, so as we did with the dirt, we use the RS noise as a mask. So how do we do it this time? So what we're going to do is we're going to create an RS color mix. We'll plug our diffuse texture into the input number 1, input 1, and we're going to create an RS constant, which is just 1 color. And for now, we're going to change that to red. You can also click on the color here and slide the HSV there. I'm going to plug that into input 2. Let's drop down. Oh yeah, we'll take the test 3 material, plug this in, drop it onto the leaves. Yeah, render like that. And currently we're viewing the texture. So on here, if I slide the mix amount, we'll get red, slide it back down, we'll get our texture. So let's use the noise in the mix amount. So that's acting as a mask. And what we can do in here is we need to increase the contrast a little bit. So something like that. And like I said, I want this effect to be quite subtle. I don't want it to be too crazy. So let's change this color to more of a yellowy kind of color. I think something like that works quite well. So what happens if we want to add another color? Okay, well we do a very similar thing. We take another RS color mix, plug the color mix into the input number 1. We'll copy this constant here, and I think we'll rename this to something like yellow constant. And this will be more like a greeny constant. Again, we can make this like red just to test it out. Plug it into input number 2. And we'll plug this into the surface here. So like we did before, we added the RS noise into the mix. So let's do that. We'll copy and paste this. Paste it in. We'll add that into the mix amount. And we've got exactly the same result. So what I do here is I just go to the coordinates tab and I just offset this in either X, Y, or Z. Doesn't really matter. 555, why not? Let's change this to like a sort of greeny color. And I just want to make this kind of natural. So slide that right down so I can see the effect that's having. Yeah, something like that. We can always adjust this later. And then I'm going to plug this final color mix into our shader in here. Let's reapply our leave single out. And I don't think I renamed this to Atlas either. Let's keep things nice and organized. Drop that on top. And now we've got different colored leaves on our tree. This looks kind of cool. Let's go up a little bit closer to one. So that's looking kind of nice. I'm a little bit concerned about how hot this is getting on the edge. This SSS here. That's something we can take a look at later, I think, when we're doing our final adjustments. But I think for now that's fine. And, you know, if we were going to be, well, we will be a lot further away from this tree, so it doesn't really make much sense to change it. I don't tend to spend too much time on assets that are far away from the camera. I think that's looking cool. Just looking over, seeing if there's anything else I can do to improve this. Let's check the transmission amount. Let's turn that down. I want to see what the effect that has. Not a massive amount there. Just switching between these. Let's take a look underneath. Yeah, I think they're looking pretty cool. Just checking the normal map. Just put it down to 0 so I can see it. Yeah, I think that's working okay. Yeah, they're looking pretty natural. I kind of like that. Then we'll zoom out. We'll sort of look at the leaves as a whole here. Zoom in just a touch. There you go, and we got some nice leaves there with some really cool backlighting. And that just makes such a difference. Bending those leaves really helps out the shader a lot. Cool, and that's pretty much the leaf shading done. What I usually do from this point onwards is that I just copy the shader over and over again to every single asset, and I just replace the textures in the RS texture nodes.